use or whatever it is that we do to it. And the other question, how do we ensure economic activities that involve the use of biotechnology? Whatever it is that we, the processes, the mechanism, the technology, how do we ensure we use them in a manner that we will continue to use these resources to our own benefit, not to our own detriment? And so, we are moving to the idea of bioeconomy. And from what you have seen here, in reality, this has been described. Dr. Datu gave us the history of what we are up against. And you never can tell what happens next. And so what are you having? The global threat that he's talked about. Are we sure something will not happen next year, 2 years' time, 5 years' time? We live in a world of uncertainty when it comes to all of these issues. You cannot be so certain what happens the very next day. Even scientists in their prediction, yes, they come up with a couple of things. Sometimes yes, we got it right. Some other times no, because of the imperfection in man. And today we're talking about biosecurity and so on and so forth. It has the idea, the knowledge, everything about it has intensified. And not too long ago, I think it was Professor Brian Webber had talked about it, that someone can actually come to you without having a gun, and indeed it was re-emphasized by the two. Remember the doctor that you all stood up for this morning? You know what happened? The COVID. I impacted on her negatively. And it did so many other persons. I lost a friend, a very close friend, to COVID. Perhaps you also know one person that died or the other. And again, in the discussion this morning, we never can say how it started, what led to it. Was it from the lab? Or was it right from nature? Some people will tell you from marking, from this, from that. Whatever it is, the key issue is that we have challenges on our hand. And so, how do we deal with these challenges? And that is why we talk about the expectation from this angle. But when it comes to the issue of sustainable production, how do we utilize these resources? How do you harvest? How do you utilize? How do you make use of such that you want us to go back? You don't abuse it. Some people will talk about sustainable development, and the common way that people will define it is, oh, development that means the needs, our own needs now. And yet, it caters for tomorrow. Tomorrow is that child unborn. He has that right to those resources that you have right to. Your neighbor has that right. Intra and that intergenerational equity. When we continue to abuse the resources, of course, we know some people will suffer. But unfortunately, man is so selfish. We need to be that we can actually battle the air you have all around us. When we battle it and make others to suffocate and die. But that is not the situation. All of us have access to clean air. But what have we done to it as well? We are abusing it in some locations. And then you have economic growth. But not just growing. How green is it? And when you add the element of green, it talks about, oh, you want to ensure that it's regenerative as well. When you talk about dependency on fossil fuel, we just talked about that. We see where it's leading us to. And so the entire world is talking about decarbonization. They're all tied to fossil fuel. And then you now have the biodiversity conservation. I talked about the loss earlier. And then we need to restore. I recall in those days, if you have been out of Lagos, after the long bridge before Ibafu, you have Kura A. Before those development you see, it was quite cooler as you go out of Lagos. But some of us today, development everywhere. And you see the ripple effects everywhere as well. When just a simple analogy here is, in your environment where you are, plant grasses. When you plant grasses all around you, when the rain drops, see the force of that, the drop of the rain. If it's bare, we force the soil to loosen. And then there will be movement of the soil. Soil erosion comes into it. But when you have grasses there, when the rain drops, that stops it. That is just a simple thing. So when you are told to plant trees here and there, in your environment, this gives us a simple idea of what we can indeed benefit from it. What is bioeconomy? Somebody has defined it using this. It says production, use, conservation, regeneration of biological resources. Whatever it is that you are using it for, you must ensure that those elements that make them sustainable are embedded in it. But just to say, Rev, the East African Regional Bioeconomy Strategy defines it, and I want us to pay attention to this. The bioeconomy as the knowledge-based production and use of biological resources to provide products, processes, and services in all economic sectors within the frame of a sustainable economic system. And as South Africa strategy says, the bioeconomy has activities that make use of bio-innovations based on biological sources, materials, and processes to generate sustainable economic, social, and environmental development. What I just want to pick out from all of that is sustainable. They're not too different from the definition. In fact, somebody has said this: production, utilization, conservation, and regeneration of biological resources, including related knowledge that could take us to the sphere of synthetic biology, to the wrong side perhaps, or to the right side. And then science, technology, and innovation to provide sustainable solutions. Is it types of information, personal information, product services within and across us economic sectors. And indeed, it talks about the transformative aspects that is embedded in it. And now you have a whole number of countries going into all of this, and it's been classified in this manner. You have high-tech bioeconomies, you have emerging diversified economies, and indeed diversified bioeconomy. You also have advanced primary sector-based bioeconomy, and a basic primary sector-based economy. If you check all of them, African countries, where do you see them? The last bar, isn't it? The basic primary sector-based economy. Of course, we have diversified bioeconomy like Mozambique. Is there? But largely, a number of the African countries are said to be in that category, the last one. Kenya, Nigeria, Mali, Senegal, Tanzania, and Uganda. Globally, they are said to be the leader when it comes to this field. And they are looking at three areas: developing new technology and processes, developing market and competitiveness, and then pushing for a more sustainable and resource efficient bioeconomy. And when you talk about resource efficiency, you are simply saying using a little to achieve so much. In Africa, generally, we also see it's rapidly growing. Of course, there's knowledge about it now, and we're talking about it today. And this gives you an idea of the revolution in what is moving on the African continent. And then you have the biodiversity. We talked about access to genetic resources and benefit sharing. And I think there's a revolution on this in Nigeria. And then you also have biotechnology. You have bioscience, innovation, and then bioeconomy that we're talking about now. Perhaps, if it's to stand on its own, maybe you and I want to talk about what Prof talked about this morning, and that was emphasized by the other two speakers. Again, in terms of readiness, you see the whole of African countries, you can see where they are. Our country, you can see where it is there. Now, examples. East African countries are actually taking the lead in this. In fact, they've got strategies, they are doing a whole lot in that. For instance, in November 2021, they launched the strategy. And so the strategy is providing a pathway that all of them should follow. Again, over the past decades, granted I would say East Africa has taken the lead. IITA is also doing some wonders in this. IITA is where, Prof, you talked about Ibadan earlier. IITA is in Ibadan. And they've done a couple of things in this area, especially focusing on the aspect of circular economy. IITA applied circular bioeconomy as an approach to provide solutions that contribute to a couple of things. For instance, land degradation, low agricultural productivity, food insecurity, greenhouse gas emission that we've talked about, and then hunger. What about poverty? Yes, it's also one of the things. And interestingly, based on their output and outcome, this shows you the sectors that they focused on, and then the output. Crop productivity, food security and food safety, job creation, natural resource efficiency, and then reduction in greenhouse gas emission. And then under each, you see the outputs that came out. The movement regarding all of this is growing. And so you have the Bio-African Convention that seeks to advance knowledge, technology, ideas, just name it, whatever it is that concerns bioeconomy is advancing it. Interestingly, there is no one of the SDGs that this has not touched or is not touching. The 17 goals, they are dependent on the resources we're talking about. And what are these resources? There's a large resource of underutilized biomass residues. Let's take examples from some of these. You are familiar with this. You handle this every now and then. In fact, it's likely when we went out just now, had a cup of tea, ate some pastries or whatever, you generate a waste. What are we doing to that waste? Now, in this, you have food crops, horticulture, industrial crops, livestock, and fishery. And interestingly, given an example, we're looking at it from the African perspective. Again, we have said that East African countries are taking the lead. We're told that generate around 130 million tons of agricultural residues per year, of which around 30 to 60 million tons is currently not utilized. It's also possible we have figures. Of course, if you check, I think the energy policy, there are some statistics mentioned regarding us in the country. Forestry activities produce large amount of residues, including over 116,000 cubic meters of sawdust. And sawdust, when you're crossing the terminal bridge, I think it's, you know that place. Sawdust, Makoko. And I recall much earlier, we have an NGO working with a Swedish organization. We developed a briquette making machine for that community. Again, the ability to manage it became a challenge. Nigeria has an estimated annual biomass potential of about 200 billion kilograms. Can we utilize this as biofuel? Interestingly, there was a feasibility study that we participated in, gas to liquid, how we can use agricultural resources and put them in manner that they become liquid as well. They are still on it. I'm not sure they've started the implementation of that project. We've talked about the word waste. We can generate a whole lot from all of that. If you look around our economy, a larger percentage of the population are dependent on what we have, the resources we have from the environment. And so, like I said here, more than 65% of the population in Africa depends on biological resources for food, energy, medicine, and other uses. And interestingly, the keynote presentation had told us that the more you eat vegetable, what did they say is will happen? Professor Mara, you said that you're going to stay away. Was it? From stroke, from hypertension, from a whole lot. So is that what you call Baba Isha or something like that? So when they tell us eat vegetable, eat vegetable, eat vegetable, it means a whole lot to us, isn't it? A whole lot to our head. But we don't know. I recall when we were in school, it will be written somewhere, especially at the clinics. If you go to the clinic, they will instruct us that if you have little money left, don't go and be buying this, buying Coke, buying that, and so on and so forth. Buy this kind of food. They were instructing us, we never knew what they were saying. Now we were, you don't want us to enjoy this Coke that you have enjoyed before. And I think that is how younger generations soon will take it. But as you grow, you don't know that you want to even minimize. So you have all of that. And then some people will say, but somebody has said that when I was growing, there was no money to eat a certain kind of food. When you now become an adult with money to eat all that you can eat, they say, no, your heart will not permit you to eat it. So that's always a challenge. Now, what are the opportunities? There's opportunity for everyone. For you and I, and indeed for every person out there. Now, we're even trying the terms of growth. There is set to double in growth over the next 10 years with government ambition to increase the size of the sector from this amount that you can see here and then the kind of jobs it's going to create. In fact, it's viewed as central to achieving the SDG. Recall we have shown that SDG, that there's nothing, there's no goal that it does not relate to. Of course, regarding that, it will satisfy, for instance, our hunger. Poverty. We can easily deal with it if we harness these resources very well. Climate protection. Climate goal number 13 is on climate change. The SDG goal 13. So that means there's even a goal. We're saying that these resources has that veritable use, let me put it that way, for dealing with the challenges of climate change and then transitioning to sustainable consumption. In fact, I think it's goal 12 that talks about sustainable production and consumption. Okay? Another goal. So if you are to relate it to each of those SDG goals or SDGs, you discover that it forms the bedrock. The potential, re-emphasizing it, can be used to achieve many of the sustainable development goals, produce value-added products, create job opportunities for youth and women. What about health and food security? We've talked about it. In fact, the larger percentage of our population are dependent on the resources. So income, wealth, just name it. Think about those smallholder farmers. They're dependent. What about the larger ones? Dependent on the resources. This hotel will not support us in doing all of this. They have no business with these resources that we're talking about. And increase the rate of economic growth in the face of rapid population. Production and use of food and feed, as well as non-food goods, simply put. So in every ramification, and indeed, think of all the sectors you can put your finger on is relevant to such. This just gives you an idea of the sectors. Of course, we have said virtually every sector. Agriculture and forestry, energy, industrial biotechnology, health care. And what the previous speakers, all of them have talked about, relate to all of this. And we say that these resources form the bedrock for translating whatever it is that they're saying. Right? I mean, we don't have the resources. Now, we will not be talking about what the issues they're talking about. Whether you're harvesting them for what is good or turning them to what is wrong. Again, this provides the bedrock. Emerging opportunities. We're familiar with cassava, sorghum, granules, and coconuts. We know, for instance, in terms of health and wellness products, they use them. Pharmaceuticals has been talked about. If you talk about aquatic species, same way people are using them. Even for foil, they're using them. What about animal hides and chicken feathers? People are also using them. And indeed, agricultural production, we talked about biocontrol of pests and diseases. Resource efficient protein production system is also there. But for us to actually add value to these things, require that we exploit them in a manner that make them sustainable. Knowledge to support food and industrial feedstock production is also needed. And indeed, the industrial sector want to ensure that they depend and utilize these resources in a manner that make them sustainable. What is also needed is robust biodiversity services that support cultural production. And indeed, if you talk about the cultural aspect, it's key. If you remember, in those days, to preserve those resources, some people will tell you, oh, some areas were zoned as evil forest. The evil forest, nobody dared to go there. But in principle, what was that forest doing? Preserving the environment in its natural form. Today, I think it's only a mountain in Cross River State that is still in its original form, based from creation, based on what we're told. Every other forest has been entered or taken out. No other one in the country. The approach that has been deployed, a range of approaches. For us, we're familiar with this. We've talked about biotechnology. In fact, we don't have the traditional economy. But I just want to talk about this. Some of the new approaches we're talking about today. We're talking about circular economy. Earlier, we have talked about IITA. Basically, our model is circular or economy. The idea of circular economy is make nature. How do you make nature, for instance? A tree that grows, the leaves will fall. When the leaves fall, what do they do? They in turn assist that tree that is growing. There's this cyclical kind of movement that keeps that tree alive. This circular economy is saying use, take, and return. Don't generate waste. The linear economy was dependent over. They talked about the industrial revolution. Since then, we follow that linear model. What has it led us to? Take, use, and dispose. But this approach is saying, no, let it come back to the environment. You have the blue economy that's also talked about today, the grey economy, biomimicry, and then you have bio-based products, bioenergy, bioeconomic clusters, bioeconomic regions. But then, the fundamental thing that is underlying all of this, the principle, is sustainability. So whatever approach we are deploying, how do we ensure that the resources remain without continuing? So for us to effectively harvest what we have, because it's how do we build and advance the situation in African country. We need to see it as a strategic driver of our economy and of all that we do. Develop and promote entrepreneurship and business, and then incubation among young scientists and innovators. One strategy for achieving this goal is by establishing technology and innovation incubation centers in and around universities. And so we can do that to make the younger ones to grow. And then you have this, the benefit that will come from it. The activities that are tied to it, reduce dependency on fossil fuels, sustainability, and so on and so forth. All of these are some of the things that we will benefit from. What must we do as far as we know? Develop a regional bioeconomy strategy. And so for the African continent, we need to do this. And then promote bio-entrepreneurship and business incubation. We also need to establish technology and innovation incubation centers, like we've talked about. And then attract green investments. They will not start with green investment. In fact, for today with climate change issues, we're talking about green investment. And then leverage green bonds. That's a financial instrument that we can leverage. And government has issued the first and second bond. I think they're moving towards the third one. And part of it focused on forestry. And then force out inefficient and wasteful fossil fuel subsidies. We know that. We've done that, forestry and all about. The potential constraint, economic and national security risk. The number of the risks have already been highlighted. Constrained access to international data. We have cyber risk. We also have failure to protect from intentional acts, harm, or misuse. People can just deliberately say, oh, we want to do this, and they harm everyone. The uncertainty surrounding all of this. How available are the materials that we were talking about? Then, the issues of climate and extreme weather, predicting. Extreme weather today, event is making a whole lot, the nonsense of a whole lot of things. And then the technology and skill power, the social acceptance is one of these. Political stability, market fluctuation, and indeed the competition surrounding it. Again, this simply shows how we can be transformative, build a case of commercial successes around indigenous knowledge. The indigenous knowledge drive all of this. Can we build business cases around all of this and then spend money, develop innovative financial instruments to drive them? It's possible. And then policies, we've talked about that. Private sector must come into this to ensure that it grows. Investors, yes. And then there should also be a system of reward. There is nothing we would do without having this knowledge, science, technology, innovation, the capacity, and the skill. At the regional level, in summary, we need to develop national bioeconomy strategy. We also need to monitor and share information. We need to develop a regional expert bioeconomic committee, harmonize standards and regulation, because virtually all the countries on the African continent, more or less, are dependent on these resources. So we need to have such. And then we have talked about attract venture capital and other investment finance. We invest in human capacity. It's highly needed, and I think this is one of the ways of creating awareness. All of us are involved as stakeholders. No one is left behind. Now, these are the potential outcomes. This sustainable industrial growth, create new bio-based products, and then protect the environment. The improve security, link farmers, and bio entrepreneurs. It's not just about we must be this, we be able to do all of that. And then create new forms of clean, sustainable, modern bioenergy to deal with issues. In conclusion, developing a bioeconomy in Africa has the potential to create jobs. Improve for security, promote sustainable development. But of course, we can only do that if we build it on sustainable management practices. Otherwise, we will continue to abuse the resources because these are the resources that all of us have access to. We also need equitable policies. We need effective governance. Of course, we've talked about this case, we've talked about the knowledge. They are all tied to ensuring that we are able to accelerate and advance the bioeconomy on the African continent. Thank you very much. Thank you so very much, sir. This has been a very enlightening presentation. If I may ask, will you be available to be my guest on NTA Business Matters to discuss bioeconomy? We will discuss that later on with the permission of Dr. Dr. As a matter of fact, I guess it's getting to me as a matter of fact, ladies and gentlemen. At this point in time, we're going to quickly go through to the next speaker so that we are able to run through the program and then quickly go for lunch before we come back for the final set of presentations. And then we can call it a day for the day one of the 9th African Conference on One Health and Biosecurity. This presentation by Dr. Eugene is so very, very important. I think we need to expand that conversation because we as Nigerians need to take the advantage that we have in terms of the economy, and the world obviously is depending on Africa for all of its resources. So if we work together collaboratively, it's going to help. My next speaker is a professor of clinical biochemistry at Covenant University, Nigeria, and a field genomic expert at the Lagos State Biobank, Directorate of Epidemiology, Biosecurity and Global Health, Lagos State Ministry of Health. He is the co-chair of the Research Committee of the African Organization for Research and Training in Cancer. He is an MPI and the U.S. Department of Defense Award for the establishment of an inclusive cancer care research equity for Black Men Consortium, as well as other qualification. He is a Fulbright scholar, and I've yet to call his name. He has come to ladies and gentlemen, Professor Solomon Rotimi. Please put your hands together for him. You deserve all the honor, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just didn't want to waste time that we will clear on through it. Yeah, once again, I really want to appreciate the organizer for asking me to speak to this topic.
Hello, Mike.
Okay, this is working. So briefly, I'm going to be speaking to the importance of a biobank in addressing emerging infectious disease. And so I'll use this, follow this outline, and I'll make it very big. We've all experienced COVID, and I want to build this on the background that has been laid by previous speakers. What is important for us to note is that the persistent threat of emerging and re-emerging infectious disease, as well as the endemic diseases, characterize the current era. And Dr. Bobadoye really did a very good job to give us the historical perspective, taking us far back to creation and to what we have right today. And so again, not just to again go over what he talked about. So if you look at the history of pandemic, you can clearly see from here, this is not showing very well, pardon me. But what is clear is that we have emerging infectious disease depending on the time that they occur. And you can, in our time, we can talk about HIV, SARS, E. coli, that particular strain. Now we know Zika, we know West Nile virus, we know dengue, we know COVID. But then we still have re-emerging infectious diseases. And the question is, how do we really understand what is going on from a historical perspective? One important thing that I would like to touch on, also part of what Professor Olabi talked about, is the impact of all of these infectious diseases, whether emerging or re-emerging, on us as the host. And we talk about selection pressure and infectious disease. What has happened is that if you go back in history, and as human beings are evolving and we're growing and we're expanding, and we're getting in contact with all of this infectious disease, human beings continue to survive. At least all of us are here because we survived COVID. The question then is, what has COVID done to our genome that 1,000 years' time, people will look back in history as if something must have happened around this time that must have affected human genome, for example. And again, you can see clearly from the other figure that infectious diseases don't just happen and then go away. They always leave a footprint. And the good thing about the robustness of the human genome, the human host, is that we've continued to emerge, we've continued to evolve. And each time we overcome a very serious infectious or pandemic, our population explodes. And so, if you're thinking our population is a lot now, we don't know what the COVID outcome will be. Because we have this sense that, yes, we have survived, and let's continue to prosper. And the way humanity celebrates prosperity is by increasing population, whether we like it or not. Again. And so, from the Lagos State perspective, what happened with COVID? Prior to COVID, the Lagos State Ministry of Health established the Lagos State Biobank. And so the Lagos State Biobank played a very critical role in response to COVID. And what we did at COVID, and this is just looking at the COVID curves and epidemics across the 5 waves in Lagos State. And so there are principal roles that biobanks are supposed to play. One is what people really know about, which is storage and preservation of biological samples. And I'd like that for you to give an idea of what a biobank is. We've all heard about Egyptian mummies and pyramids. That is part of what we're doing right now. We're preserving items for future use. When those people that lived that time were doing the embalming and they were keeping it, they were doing it for other reasons. But now, we can go back to those bio-resource materials and study them and understand what happened that time, the biological threats they faced, the kind of life they lived, the diet they fed on, how they survived or how they succumbed to diseases. And such a bio-resource, for example, has contributed a lot to understanding and advances in medical sciences. And so for now, for those of us who are living now, we also have the responsibility to develop biobanks. But beyond that, biobanks are also very useful in facilitating disease surveillance and epidemiological studies. They are also very useful as genomic resource for understanding infectious disease and their host, as I said before, and understanding us. And yes, we talk about, we did very well, we survived COVID, we can talk about several things, it's in our diet, it's in our environment. But as a basic scientist, I can also tell us that it's also about our genome. There must be something in our gene that makes us to respond better. And I'll give an example. All over the world, you look at COVID's mortality data, men died more from COVID than women. And that is a biological factor. Doesn't necessarily because sex is a biological factor. There's something about the female species of human beings that makes them to survive very well to that infection. And we can talk about the science of it and all of that. We all know that testosterone is something that drives down the immune system and a whole lot of mechanisms. But again, we're saying that having that biological resource stored helps us to understand the biological basis of survival. And we can use that information to help us to overcome future pandemics. And so this is what we've done at Lagos State Biobank. At Lagos State Biobank, we collected all positive COVID cases in Lagos, and that's my colleague, Dr. Uzuki, sitting there at the back. And then Lagos State acquired this sequencing facility, which we were able to sequence over 1,200 whole genome sequence of COVID that were positive in Lagos. And then with that, we were able to follow the trend and change And then, of course, as we sequence, we're uploading it into the global biorepository of data. And then you can see right there the contribution of Lagos State Biobank. And so we're able to use this information to understand, people talk about variants, emergence, and all of that. We're able to use the resources of our biobank to really understand the kind of variants that we had in Lagos. We also went ahead to also look at the sub-lineage of these variants, and then we were able to also track over time how these variants were emerging. What was important at the end of the day was we're also able to map to different local governments and say, in this region, this is where this particular variant evolved from, based on the samples that were collected in the biobank. So, moving forward, what do we plan to do now that we have this resource? Again, as I said, touched on, infectious disease don't just happen and disappear. There's always a trade-off. Example, sometimes in the past history, malaria evolved. What happened was that there's a change in the human genome. Sickle cell hemoglobin developed, because 6% dihydrogenase deficiency developed for us to survive malaria. We can sit here now and say, oh, those changes are not good, but they are not good because humanity used them to survive to where we are today. There are other ones. Again, people in the cancer space talk about BRCA gene confers high risk to development of breast, prostate, ovarian cancer. But those mutations were not just there for fun. They were evolved as a result of our survival of ancient virus. Sometimes in the past, there was a viral pandemic, and individuals who were able to evolve a mutation in this gene survived, and they came back to all of us who are here now. Unfortunately, it was a trade-off to say, do you die young or you live old enough to have cancer, for example? And so the challenge for us now is to look at what is going on and how we can utilize that information to develop a better way to treat it. So the question is, what are the genes that made us survive COVID? We still don't know. And would those changes in our gene have unwanted consequences in the future? We still don't know. So the advantage of developing biobank and keeping results is to say we can go back and say, okay, let us go back to those samples that we have collected and interrogate these genes. And so we developed, and this is a brainchild of the Honorable Commissioner for Health. Initially was a genomic project, and then it changed to a economics project because of his faith in that we can use genomic information to drive the bioeconomy. And so what we're planning to do, again, so ever since development of the human genome, people know about the human genome and sequence over and over again, but again, the other aspect of it is that that information has been used to develop a lot of pharmaceuticals and a lot of interventions that have generated a lot of money. However, despite the fact that Africa contains over 90% of the diversity of human genome, Africans, including the study that Professor Olabi is leading, have only contributed about 4% of genetic information. We are highly diverse, but our genetic information is not really available. And so there's a little to nothing that can be developed based on our own uniqueness because the information is not out there. So we're open to use the platform of, again, there are a few studies going on there, funded by NIH, funded by private investigators, but again, there's going to be restriction because there's nothing like developing your own tool, doing your own thing. And so this is what we're using. We're hoping to use this platform to do. We're hoping that the information that we develop, the genetic information, will be able to, in Lagos State, to develop policy, drive science, and contribute to global health. So we're hoping to sequence at least 5,000 Lagosians over time. And our approach is that we're targeting all of these diseases that we're going to collect samples on, we're going to biobank them, we're going to also collect from apparently healthy individuals, and then we're going to follow them over time. We're doing a whole lot of scientific things that we're able to do at Lagos State Biobank, and we have a lot of partners and a lot of collaborators. Importantly, for those of us, for people who work in cancer space, one of the things that we do to develop drugs is to test drugs and develop things in the test tube using cancer cell line. Almost all the cancer cell lines available were those developed on white people. We want to begin to see how we can do this within our population as well. Again, I try to rush through because of our time. Definitely, we can see that the establishment of Lagos State Biobank has contributed to the generation of knowledge, science, that will contribute to the control of COVID pandemic. And we look forward
Please, ladies and gentlemen, can we put our hands one more time together for Prof? These are the kinds of precedents that makes my job easier. You know, and Prof, you made mention about, is it that women survived better during COVID than men did? This life is not fair. So, you mean that I think we have to change. I'm not about to start a gender war. Okay, let's hear from Bob because that matter is making me think when I'm coming back to this work.
Don't worry, we are here for you. I just want to ask a question about the genetic makeup of Africans and the possibility that it protected us during COVID for some unknown reason. However, in places like US and UK, Europe, a lot of Africans disproportionately were affected by COVID and died of COVID. So they still have the African genetic makeup. How do you explain that?
Yes,
In response, did Bobo Nishe have anything to do with our own survival here? With the malaria drugs and all of those things?
okay, so I only base my response only on available evidence. We don't know if we're going to share them. So that's one thing. So the interesting thing about genetics is that there is the gene itself, there is the environment, the impact of the environment on the gene, programming it through the epigenetic pathway. So I'll give an example, and I hope Professor Wolabi will complement this about that's what is called the Nigerian paradox, where a gene was found to be responsible for, I believe, at least your officer, Alzheimer and dementia in African America. And the same study was done in Ibadan and was found that it was not associated, was not linked with Alzheimer. So there are genes that are just primarily for what we call the surrogate indicator of ancestry, that this is where you are from. And now if you take it from here to another place, should you develop a disease and they find that gene in you, it's just purely an association, not really a position. So that's another thing. But for African Americans, most likely epigenetic programming has happened and then made them more susceptible to it. So the thing with US data is that they really don't collect data about country of birth. It's just you are classified as African American, Caucasian, Hispanic, and all of that. And so until we're able to disaggregate data to really look at the country of birth and the history of migration, until before such a question can be answered.
Thank you very much. Please put your hands together for the Prof. Wow. Well, Prof, is there a way I can infuse the feminine gene into my system so I can have a double? Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I don't want to stretch this too long. We just have one more presentation before we go for lunch. But I quickly want to recognize Professor Bayori Femi in the house here. Since morning I've actually... Okay, please can I put your hands together for him? It's good to see you again, sir. Pardon me, sir. I think some of us are growing older, as a matter of fact. So sometimes these things just escape our minds. However, our next speaker is going to be speaking on a topic titled Ensuring Effective Response to Infectious Disease Outbreak Review of the 2023 Diphtheria Outbreak. And he is an adjunct professor, physician and development strategist with 2 decades of roles in international private and public organizations. Some of the roles which are with some of the world's leading development organizations with strong multi-country experience in sub-Saharan Africa. He has served on several boards and working groups. He is on the governing council of the Academy of Learning Nigeria and the Global Malaria in Pregnancy Working Group. He is the Director General of the West African Institute of Public Health. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Francis Ohaniro. Please can I put your hands together for him? Dr. Arayada has been preparing the slides because he says he wants to give us a whole huge content, especially when it has to do with AIDs. And then we hope perhaps that is going to lead us straight up to our time for lunch. And so, clicker a flash drive. Please, it needs a flash drive or a clicker. And so, ladies and gentlemen, please, I'm going to give you indulgence when we go for lunch. We should do it as fast as we can because we have to be back here for the final session of the presentation, which we have Mr. Femi Olagbiba, the importance of a smart health information platform presenting. We'll also have Dr. Kate Douglas, who will be joining us virtually. As a matter of fact, he's speaking on development of a climate-resilient artificial intelligence trade platform for sustainability. And then we have Dr. Olamide Okulaja, who's going to be speaking on public health care financing in Nigeria, which we forward. And finally, we have some abstract presentation before we call it a day for the day one. Tomorrow, I'm going to ask us to please be here on time so that we can run through the program. And as soon as we are fully ready, we will obviously have a lot of those engagements. I'm glad for every one of us who have been engaging as speakers. I'm very sure that we'll have other opportunities to do that. So ladies and gentlemen, please bring in your questions as much as you can. If they can be attended to right here, we'll certainly have the consortium team who will definitely do that. So is the slide uploaded now? I can't be keeping Dr. Francis standing. So Doc, please can you come and stand by my side? Let me have some of those energy flowing through, you know. But if you were female, I would have preferred it. Because it's like you and I seems to be in the same category. and they say it's a man's world. And they need to address some of these issues. And so I'm going to just let you have the platform so that you can engage the delegates before your slides and come up with some of the content and thoughts that will help us maximize our time. Please put your hands together one more time for him.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a pleasure to be here. Like I was telling my friend Okulaja, he refused to invite me, and then the powers that be invited me. So while we're waiting for the slide, I don't know if you are familiar with the term Ubuntu. Ubuntu. Who knows what Ubuntu is? Togetherness, okay. It's actually a Bantu word, or term rather. Together. Okay. Who is from the north here? Is anybody from the north here? Has anybody heard of Zamantakewa in Hausa? You are nodding your head, madam. What is Zamantakewa? So togetherness too. Okay. Is anyone from the southeast here? Who has heard of Igwebike? Anybody from the southeast here? Okay. So Igwebike, Ubuntu, Zamantakewa, they are all generally based on African worldview, philosophy of the idea of it's all about us. Ubuntu is actually I am because you are. Ubuntu is about I am because you are. So all those philosophies revolve around this concept about the African thinking that society cannot be about the individual. Society is about all of us. It's all or none law. And the same thing applies critically, like Prof was talking about the issues of what we have in society and in terms of how genes play out and all those things. It's all about all of us. And when you come to the depth of epidemic response, it's all about all of us. And that's why when we talk about response in epidemics, we talk about all of society, all of government, all of the people. Because no one group can do epidemic response alone. Are we agreed? We are lucky, let me put it that way, with COVID, I will still say luck to a large extent. Whatever the genetic and the experiential side of our response systems have been that enabled us to overcome it. We're lucky. Same thing with Ebola. But then Africa has been able over time to begin to be very adaptive in its knowledge economy in terms of responses, for epidemics, because Africa is learning. And we're beginning to have a new generation of Africans that believe that the knowledge system is key to response for epidemics. And this has played out over time in our response system. But of course, the biggest challenge we've had with responses has always been the purview of resources. Does anybody disagree? Resources, and then of course our governance models and how our governments have been able to do the right things in the right places. I'm still waiting for my presentation. I'm here to discuss diphtheria and as an infectious disease and the response so far in Nigeria and where we are. And I'm sure some of you here are familiar with it. Is there anybody here who doesn't know what diphtheria is from all the information that is going on in the media? Is there anybody that does not know diphtheria? Who is the mother here among the ladies? Yes. You gave your child a particular